The applause had barely faded when Lin Yu raised my design board above her head and smiled. Thank you, everyone. I really didn't expect my work to resonate with the judges this much. Her voice was soft, modest, almost embarrassed. The auditorium erupted again. I stood at the back of the hall, staring at the same design I had spent 3 months creating. The curved silver structure, the layered shadow effect, the tiny asymmetrical window in the center, even a handwritten annotation in the lower right corner. It was mine. Every line was mine. Yet the name printed beneath, it was hers. Lin Yu. My fingers tightened around the edge of the seat. I should have felt furious. Instead, I felt something colder, because I had already seen this scene once, and I knew exactly what happened next. The lead judge leaned toward the microphone. Miss Lin, there is one thing I find particularly interesting about your submission. Lin Yu's smile stiffened. What is that, Professor Zhao? The development process. The auditorium became quiet. Professor Zhao tapped the screen behind him. Your final design is unusually mature. Could you explain how you arrived at this structural solution? Lin Yu blinked. For half a second, fear flashed across her face. Then she smiled again. Of course. I closed my eyes. In my previous life, this was where I had stood up. I had rushed onto the stage. I had shouted that she stole my work. I had presented screenshots, sketches, timestamps, and drafts. And I had been destroyed. Not because my evidence was false. Because I had made one mistake. I had revealed everything before she finished lying. Lin Yu had cried. Her friends had defended her. The school had accused me of jealousy. And Professor Zhao had asked the question that crushed me. If you really created this, why did you give your files to Lin Yu? I hadn't, but someone had forged a message from my account. By the end of that afternoon, I had become the thief. Lin Yu became the victim. My scholarship disappeared. My reputation disappeared. And 3 months later, so did my life. I opened my eyes. The stage was still there. The applause had stopped. Lin Yu was still standing beneath the spotlight. And I was alive. Alive. 21 years old. Back at the National Student Design Competition. 2 days before my life had been ruined. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Not from anger. From disbelief. I had been given another chance. And this time, I would not save her. Professor Zhao repeated the question. Miss Lin. Lin Yu swallowed. I developed the concept through several stages. Can we see those stages? Her expression changed. I'm sorry. Your preliminary sketches. Your discarded versions. Your material experiments. Professor Zhao pointed toward the assistant. Bring up the submission archive. My heart gave a slow beat. The archive. In my previous life, I had forgotten about it. The competition required every contestant to submit the complete creation history 2 days before the final judging. I had done it. Lin Yu had not, because she had stolen my finished design the night before. She had assumed the final presentation mattered more than the archive. She had been wrong. But in my previous life, I had panicked and exposed my accusation too early. This time, I simply watched. The assistant connected the archive drive. The screen flickered. Folder after folder appeared. Lin Yu's smile disappeared. Professor Zhao frowned. Miss Lin, this folder appears to contain only your final render. Yes. Where are the earlier drafts? The microphone caught the slight crack in her voice. Someone in the audience whispered. Didn't she say she spent 3 months on it? Another student murmured. Maybe she worked on paper. Professor Zhao looked at her. That is possible. But the competition rules require digital or photograph development records. Lin Yu's face became pale. I had a computer problem. I almost laughed. That was the exact excuse she had used before. She hadn't changed. Neither had her lies. Professor Zhao nodded slowly. Then we can verify your backup. Lin Yu's eyes moved toward the audience. They passed over hundreds of faces. Then they stopped on me. For one brief moment, neither of us moved. Her expression was complicated. She recognized me. Of course she did. In this life, I hadn't confronted her yet. But we had been classmates for 3 years. To everyone else, we were merely familiar classmates. To Lin Yu, I was the person whose work she had stolen. She expected me to expose her. Her eyes almost begged me to do it. I said nothing. Her lips tightened. Professor Zhao noticed. Is there a problem? No. Lin Yu quickly looked away. I just remembered that my backup is on another device. Bring it tomorrow. Professor Zhao closed the folder. We will verify all finalist submissions before announcing the result. The judges moved on. The atmosphere gradually relaxed. But Lin Yu remained frozen. I watched her from across the hall. In my previous life, she had won the championship that night. She had stood on stage, holding the trophy while I stood outside the auditorium in disgrace. This time, I had no intention of taking the trophy from her. I only wanted her to explain how she had created something she never made. That was enough. After the ceremony ended, students poured into the corridor. Someone bumped my shoulder. Chen Mo. I turned. It was my roommate, Han Wei. He looked confused. You're unusually quiet. Am I? You're staring at Lin Yu like you're watching a funeral. I looked toward the far end of the corridor. Lin Yu was surrounded by her friends. One of them, Zhao Min, was talking rapidly. You need to fix the archive tonight. Lin Yu whispered. I know. How? I'll make the drafts. Zhao Min's eyes widened. Can you? I don't have a choice. I almost stopped walking. Almost. But then I remembered something else. The forged message. The fake file sharing record. The accusation that had destroyed me. It hadn't been Lin Yu alone. Someone had helped her. Someone who understood my computer account well enough to fabricate evidence. In my previous life, I had discovered that person only after everything was over. This time I had 2 days. 2 days to find out who had helped her. And this time, I would not make the mistake of trusting anyone simply because they smiled at me. Han Wei nudged me. Mo. Let's go. Where? Computer lab. He frowned. Why? I looked back once. Lin Yu was already watching me. I smiled faintly, because I have some old files to check. That night, at 11:47 p.m., I found something that made my blood run cold. A login record. Someone had accessed my competition account 3 nights earlier. The username was mine. The device was not. And the IP address belonged to the design studio on the 3rd floor. The same studio where Lin Yu always worked. I stared at the screen. Then I noticed the access time. 2:13 a.m. The exact hour when, in my previous life, my original design had disappeared from my private drive. My breathing slowed. It wasn't just Lin Yu. Someone else was involved. And they were already moving. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Because I had finally understood the shape of the trap. In my previous life, I had believed Lin Yu had stolen one finished design. That belief had made everything simple. Too simple. She stole my work. I confronted her. She lied. Someone helped her. I lost. But now, with the benefit of another life, I could see the gaps. Lin Yu had never been skilled enough to create the forged digital records herself. She barely knew how to organize her project folders. The person who accessed my account at 2:13 a.m. had known exactly where my files were stored. That meant someone had been watching me before the theft. I opened my old project folder. 3 versions of the design were there. Version 1, Version 2, Version 3, and the final submission. I examined the timestamps. Then I noticed something strange. Version 3 had been opened at 2:08 a.m., 5 minutes before the unauthorized login. I stared at the timestamp. Someone had previewed the file before entering my account. Why? What were they looking for? I leaned back. Then I remembered. My design wasn't the only thing in that folder. There was also a private research document. It contained notes about an experimental material I had developed for the competition. The material was inexpensive, flexible, and structurally strong. If the design won, that research could become valuable. Suddenly, this wasn't just about stealing a competition entry. Someone wanted the entire concept. I copied every file onto an external drive. Then I printed the login records. I made 3 copies. One went into my backpack. One went into my dorm locker. The last one I mailed to myself. I had learned something in my previous life. Never keep your evidence in one place. At 8 the next morning, I arrived at the studio. Lin Yu was already there. She sat beside the window with a laptop open. Her fingers moved quickly. Too quickly. I stopped outside the door. She was drawing. Badly. The lines were stiff. The proportions were wrong. She deleted the page. Started again. Deleted it again. Zhao Min stood behind her. How long will this take? I don't know. You said you could recreate the process. I said I would try. Zhao Min lowered her voice. What if Professor Zhao asked for the material testing records? Lin Yu stopped typing. They won't. What if they do? They won't. Her voice suddenly became sharp. I said they won't. Silence. Then Zhao Min whispered, what about Chunmo? My name made both of them freeze. I stepped into the room. Good morning. Lin Yu's face turned white. Zhao Min immediately smiled. Chunmo. You're early. I usually am. I walked to my desk. Lin Yu stared at me. You heard us. I placed my bag down. Heard what? Her fingers tightened around the mouse. Nothing. Then there's nothing to explain. I sat down. For the next 10 minutes, nobody spoke. I could feel her watching me. She expected anger, an accusation, a confrontation, anything. Nothing. Finally, she approached. Chunmo. I looked up. Yes. She smiled. I heard you also submitted a design. I did. Wasn't it similar to mine? The room became quiet. There it was. The first move. In my previous life, I had immediately said yes. Then she had turned that answer against me. This time I simply asked, why do you think that? Her smile faltered. Someone mentioned it. Who? She didn't answer. I looked back at my screen. Then you should ask them. She stood there for several seconds. Then she walked away. Han Wei, who had just entered the room, stared after her. What was that? Nothing. Nothing. He lowered his voice. She's been asking everyone whether your design is similar to hers. I looked at him. Who told you? 3 people. I smiled. So she's preparing the story. Han Wei frowned. What story? I didn't answer, because at that moment, my phone vibrated. A message from the competition committee. Important notice. All finalists must submit complete source files and creation records by 6 p.m. today. Any unexplained inconsistency may result in disqualification. I read it twice. Then I looked toward Lin Yu. She had received the same message. Her face had become completely expressionless. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing. Fear of being unable to explain. She stood abruptly. I need to go out. Zhao Min grabbed her wrist. Where? Somewhere. You can't leave now. Let go. Their argument became louder. I remained seated. Then the studio door opened. Professor Zhao entered. Everyone became silent. He held a thin folder in his hand. Before today's submission, he said, I want to make one thing clear. His gaze swept across the room. We are not judging only the final product. He placed the folder on the table. We are judging whether the person standing before us actually created it. Lin Yu's shoulders stiffened. Professor Zhao continued. A beautiful design without a credible creation process is meaningless. His eyes briefly landed on her. Understand? Lin Yu nodded. Yes, Professor. He left. The moment the door closed, she sat down. Her hands were shaking. I looked at my own folder. Everything was ready. Sketches, rejected concepts, material tests, photographs, source files, every revision, every mistake, every improvement, a complete history of something I had actually created. Lin Yu had none of it, but I still wasn't going to accuse her. Not yet, because there was another question. Who would help her access my account? At 5:30 p.m., I received another message. This one wasn't from the committee. It came from an unknown number. Stop digging. You already lost once. Don't make the same mistake twice. I stared at the words. My heart became very still. Nobody in this life was supposed to know that. Nobody, unless someone else remembered. Or unless the person behind Lin Yu had been waiting for me to wake up. I slowly deleted the message. Then I stood. Across the room, Lin Yu looked at me. I met her eyes. This time, I didn't look away. Lin Yu. Her face tightened. What? I smiled. Good luck with your submission. She stared at me as if she couldn't understand. I picked up my folder. I'm sure you'll need it. And I walked past her. Behind me, I heard her whisper, Chunmo. What do you know? I didn't answer, because the truth was much worse than what she feared. I knew how this story ended. But this time, I intended to let her write every line herself. By 6 o'clock, the submission room was packed. Students stood in small groups, clutching laptops and folders against their chests. Some whispered about the judges. Others stared at their screens for the last time, terrified that one missing file might cost them months of work. I placed my folder on the submission desk. The committee assistant checked the contents one by one. Original sketches? Here. Material testing records? Here. Source files? 3 drives. She looked up. 3. I keep backups. She gave a small, approving smile. Smart. Behind me, someone let out a quiet scoff. I didn't need to turn around. Linyu. The assistant moved on. Creation photographs? I handed them over. She checked the timestamps. Everything matched. Then she signed a receipt. Your submission is complete. Thank you. I stepped aside. Linyu approached next. Her confidence had returned. Or at least, she had rebuilt enough of it to stand upright. She carried a thick folder. For a moment, I wondered whether she had managed to fabricate something convincing. Then I noticed the edges. Fresh paper. Almost every sheet was clean. No creases. No stains. No signs of repeated handling. A genuine 3-month design process never looked that neat. Professor Zhao was standing nearby. He glanced at her folder. You have the development sketches? Yes. Material tests? Yes. Photographic records? Yes. His gaze lingered on her. Good. Linyu exhaled. Then she looked at me. Her eyes carried a strange confidence, as if she had found a way out. I didn't react. She walked over. Chen Mo. I looked up. Something wrong. She lowered her voice. I heard your submission went smoothly. It did. Congratulations. Thank you. Her smile was almost sincere. Then she leaned closer. I hope yours is accepted. I studied her expression. There was no anger. No fear. Only calculation. What do you mean? Nothing. She straightened. I just think it's important that everyone gets credit for their own work. For the first time, I understood what she was doing. She wasn't threatening me. She was preparing the accusation. She wanted the judges to hear that sentence later and remember her as the person concerned about academic integrity. I nodded. You're right. She blinked. I smiled. Everyone should. She walked away. Han Wei came to my side. Why do I feel like you two are talking about completely different things? We are. He frowned. What are you planning? Nothing. You keep saying that. Because I'm not planning anything. I looked toward the submission desk. I'm just letting people make their own choices. He studied me. Then he lowered his voice. That's not like you. He was right. It wasn't. Before everything happened, I had always believed that if I saw a problem, I had to fix it. If a teammate was careless, I reminded him. If someone was treated unfairly, I spoke up. If a friend made a mistake, I covered for them. That habit had almost killed me. Not literally, but close enough. Because people eventually learn something about those who constantly rescue them. They stop being grateful. They become dependent. And when you finally refuse to save them, they call you cruel. I had spent my first life learning that lesson. I wasn't going to forget it again. That evening, the committee locked the submissions inside the review room. The finalists were dismissed. As I left the building, I received another anonymous message. Last warning. I stopped beneath the street lamp. Rain had started falling. Small drops touched the phone screen. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. If you accuse Linyu, your private research will be uploaded. My expression changed. That document had never been submitted. Only 3 people knew it existed. Me, my former research advisor, and I stopped breathing. The design studio administrator. Mr. Gu. In my previous life, Mr. Gu had testified that I had voluntarily shared my project files with Linyu. I had believed him. Why? Because he had shown me a log proving it. A log that now looked suspiciously similar to the one I had discovered. I walked through the rain without opening my umbrella. My mind moved quickly. If Mr. Gu was involved, then Linyu wasn't the mastermind. She was the face. Someone else was controlling the situation. And that person had known exactly what would happen if I fought back. I returned to the dormitory and opened my laptop. Instead of searching for Linyu, I searched for Mr. Gu. His recent activity, his administrative access, his file transfers, his connection to the competition server. At 1:16 a.m., I found something. A deleted access record. The file had been removed from the visible log, but the backup system had preserved its shadow. User, GU Jun. Accessed, chenmo/research/material prototype. Time, 2:21 a.m. 3 days before my design disappeared. I stared at the screen. Then I noticed another entry. The same account had accessed Lin Yu's project folder. The time was only 9 minutes later. I leaned back slowly. So that was it. Someone had copied my research first, then my design. Lin Yu had only needed the final presentation. But why? I opened a browser and searched the competition sponsor, a private materials company, Huasheng Advanced Materials. My stomach tightened. Their sponsored award was worth far more than the competition trophy. And the company had recently announced that it was looking for student-developed structural materials. My research could be commercially valuable. Suddenly, the stolen design made sense. The competition wasn't the destination. It was a showcase. Someone wanted my prototype. Lin Yu was simply the person they could put on stage. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I didn't need to expose them tonight. In fact, doing so would be foolish. If I accused Mr. Gu without complete evidence, he could destroy the traces. If I accused Lin Yu, she would immediately claim victimhood. So I did the one thing neither of them expected. I stopped looking. I shut down the computer. Then I went to sleep. The next morning, the first thing I heard was shouting. I opened my dormitory door. Students were crowded around the bulletin board. Han Wei saw me. "Mo, what happened?" He grabbed my arm. "Your name is on the complaint list." I pushed through the crowd. A printed notice had been pinned to the board. Formal academic misconduct investigation. Underneath, it was my name. My heart remained strangely calm. The accusation claimed that I had submitted a design suspiciously similar to another finalist's work. Lin Yu's. There were screenshots attached. Side-by-side comparisons. My design, her design. They looked identical. The crowd began whispering. "That's crazy. Maybe he copied her. But didn't he submit first?" I heard Lin Yu has the original sketches. Han Wei looked furious. "This is nonsense." I reached toward the notice. "Don't touch it." He stopped. "Why?" "Because it's evidence." "Evidence of what?" I pointed at the bottom. "Look at the publication time." He leaned closer. The notice had been uploaded at 6:02 a.m., only 2 minutes after the committee's submission deadline. Han Wei's anger turned into confusion. "So, it means someone had access to the committee's internal records before the investigation officially opened." He stared at me. "Ooh." I looked at the security camera above the hallway. Then I looked at the crowded faces. "That's what I want to know." A familiar voice came from behind us. "Chen Mo." The crowd parted. Lin Yu stood there. She looked pale, but not frightened. Almost sad. She held a folder against her chest. I didn't want this to happen. Someone immediately murmured, "She's so kind." She probably tried to stop the complaint. I watched her carefully. She was good. Very good. Her eyes were wet. Her shoulders were slightly hunched. Her voice trembled at exactly the right moments. "Professor Zhao asked me for my development records," she said. "I gave them to him." Then she looked at me. "I never accused you." The crowd became silent. I said nothing. She took one step closer. "Chen Mo, if you think something is wrong, you can explain it to the committee." Her tone was gentle, almost compassionate. I suddenly understood her strategy. She wanted me to fight. She wanted me angry. She wanted me to deny everything in front of everyone. Because once I started talking emotionally, she would produce her carefully fabricated records. And the story would become simple. The popular student with evidence. The angry student claiming theft. I smiled. "Okay." Lin Yu froze. "Okay. I'll explain." Relief flickered across her face. Then I added, "But not here." Her expression changed. "Where?" "At the committee hearing." I walked past her. She grabbed my sleeve. "Chen Mo." I looked down at her hand. She immediately released it. Her voice dropped. "You don't have to make this worse." I met her eyes. "I agree." Then I walked away. Behind me, the crowd began whispering again. But this time I wasn't listening, because my phone had just vibrated. A message from Professor Zhao. "Come to my office alone." I looked at the words. Then another message arrived. "Bring nothing with you." My footsteps stopped. That wasn't Professor Zhao's usual style. And suddenly, I wondered whether the person who had been watching me had finally decided to stop hiding. Professor Zhao's office door was half open. I knocked once. "Come in." I entered. He was sitting behind his desk. Mr. Gu stood beside the window. My eyes rested on him for a second. Then I understood why Professor Zhao had told me to come alone. Mr. Gu smiled. Chun Mo. I pulled out the chair. You wanted to see me? Professor Zhao gestured toward the seat. Sit. I sat. Mr. Gu remained standing. Professor Zhao folded his hands. You know about the complaint? Yes. You understand how serious it is? Yes. He watched me carefully. Then why aren't you defending yourself? I looked at him. Because I haven't been asked to yet. Mr. Gu's eyebrows rose. Professor Zhao was silent. I continued. If the committee wants an explanation, I'll provide one. But I'm not going to argue with students in a hallway. Professor Zhao's expression softened slightly. That is sensible. Mr. Gu interrupted. Or perhaps he's afraid. I turned toward him. Afraid of what? Of being caught. The room became quiet. I studied his face. He was older, perhaps 45, with neatly combed hair and the permanent smile of someone accustomed to being trusted. In my previous life, I had mistaken that smile for kindness. Now I noticed something else. His right hand was trembling. Barely, but was... I looked back at Professor Zhao. Why is Mr. Gu here? Professor Zhao hesitated. He manages the studio's technical records. I know. Then you know he has reviewed your file history. Yes. Mr. Gu's smile returned. I reviewed it because there were irregularities. What irregularities? Your account accessed Lin Yu's folder. I almost laughed. So we're discussing that. Yes. When? 3 nights ago. Exact time. Mr. Gu didn't answer. I waited. Professor Zhao looked at him. Mr. Gu cleared his throat. Approximately 2 in the morning. Approximately? Yes. I leaned back. Interesting. What? I have a complete backup of the server logs. Mr. Gu's face changed. Only for an instant. Then it was gone. Professor Zhao noticed. You have a backup? I have my own records. Mr. Gu stepped forward. Those can be altered. Of course. I nodded. So can yours. Silence. Professor Zhao looked between us. Enough. He opened a folder. Chinemo, I haven't decided whether the complaint has merit. Good. But I need your cooperation. You'll have it. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he asked, Did you give Lin Yu access to your project? No. Did you ever send her your source files? No. Did you ever discuss your research with her? No. Mr. Gu suddenly smiled. That contradicts the messages. Professor Zhao looked at him. What messages? Mr. Gu opened his tablet. Several conversations where Chun Mo appears to offer assistance. I stared at the screen. The messages were familiar. Too familiar. They were almost identical to the ones used against me in my previous life. But this time I saw the flaw. The message timestamps were wrong. I leaned closer. This conversation happened on Tuesday. Yes. At 9:42 p.m. Mr. Gu nodded. I pointed at the screen. Impossible. Why? I was in the materials lab. Mr. Gu smiled. You can verify that. I already did. Professor Zhao looked up. I continued. The lab access system recorded my entry at 9:31 p.m. and exit at 11:07. Mr. Gu's smile disappeared. Professor Zhao immediately reached for the phone. Check it. Mr. Gu's expression tightened. I don't have access to that system. I do, Professor Zhao said. He made a call. I sat quietly. Within minutes, the record was confirmed. My account had indeed been inside the materials lab during the entire period when those messages were supposedly sent. Professor Zhao put down the phone. Mr. Gu looked uncomfortable. Then perhaps the timestamp was altered. Perhaps. I smiled. That would mean someone altered the messages. Nobody spoke. I stood. I think we're done. Professor Zhao nodded slowly. You can go. I walked toward the door. Chin Mo. I turned. His voice was quieter now. Don't underestimate this situation. I looked at him. I don't. Then I left. In the corridor, I found Lin Yu waiting. She had clearly been listening. Her face was tense. You went in alone. Yes. What do they ask? Nothing important. She stared at me. You're lying. Probably. She stepped closer. Chinemo, why are you doing this? I looked at her. Doing what? You're acting like you know something. I didn't answer. Her eyes reddened. You think I stole your design? I remained silent. Say it. Still nothing. She clenched her fists. You think I'm a thief? I finally spoke. I think you should be careful about whose help you accept. Her face went pale. What does that mean? You'll find out. I walked away. Behind me, she whispered, Chunmo. I didn't turn. That evening, something unexpected happened. Professor Zhao sent an email to all finalists. The committee had discovered inconsistencies in the submitted evidence. The hearing would be moved forward. Tomorrow morning. Public. Every finalist would be present. Every source file would be reviewed. Every development record would be examined. And for the first time, Lin Yu couldn't simply perform innocence. She would have to demonstrate creation. I returned to the dormitory and found Han Wei sitting on my bed. He looked serious. You need to see this. He handed me his phone. A photograph. Mr. Gu was standing outside a private office building. Beside him was a man wearing the badge of Huashing Advanced Materials. The photograph had been taken that afternoon. Han Wei swallowed. My cousin works nearby. He recognized the company. I stared at the image. Then I saw something else. A document folder in Mr. Gu's hand. The company logo was visible. Han Wei asked, Do you think they're connected to your design? I don't think. I looked at the photograph again. I know. He lowered his voice. Then what are you going to do? I put the phone down. Nothing. He stared at me. Nothing. Not tonight. But tomorrow. Tomorrow. They'll have to explain everything themselves. I opened my laptop. Then I created one final folder. Inside it, I placed every piece of evidence I had collected. The unauthorized login. The altered timestamps. The server shadow records. The research access. The photograph of Mr. Gu. But I didn't send it to the committee. Not yet. Instead, I encrypted it and scheduled an automatic release. If I failed to appear at tomorrow's hearing, the evidence would be sent to Professor Zhao, the competition board, and Huashing's compliance department. Han Wei watched silently. You really prepared for everything. I closed the laptop. No. I looked out the window. I'm just done gambling with my future. The next morning, I arrived at the competition hall at 8:55. The doors opened at 9. Inside, every finalist had gathered. Lin Yu sat in the front row. Mr. Gu stood beside the technical team. Professor Zhao walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. He picked up the microphone. Today, we are not here to decide who is more popular. Lin Yu's face stiffened. We are here to determine who created the work they submitted. A screen descended behind him. Then he said the words that made Lin Yu's expression collapse. Every finalist will be required to reconstruct their design process live. He paused. No prepared speech. No one moved. No written explanation. Professor Zhao looked directly at Lin Yu. Only the work. I sat in the back row. Calmly. For the first time, I saw Lin Yu look at her folder as if it were a life raft. Then the lights dimmed. The first design appeared on the screen. Not mine. Another finalist's. The student walked onto the stage. Professor Zhao asked his first question. The student answered. Then came the second. Then the third. He explained every decision naturally. The judges nodded. Then Professor Zhao called the next name. Lin Yu. She stood. Her legs were visibly stiff. She walked toward the stage. The entire hall watched. She placed her hand on the presentation tablet. Professor Zhao looked at her. Miss Lin. Yes. Tell us why you changed the central support angle from your first draft. Lin Yu opened her mouth. No sound came out. Her eyes moved toward me. And in that moment, I knew. She had reached the part of the story she could not fake. Not anymore. Lin Yu stared at the design projected behind her. The room was silent enough that I could hear the faint hum of the projector. Professor Zhao waited. Why did you change the central support angle? Lin Yu swallowed. I wanted to improve the structural balance. Why? Because the original angle created visual instability. Professor Zhao nodded. What instability? Lin Yu looked at the screen. Her lips parted. Nothing came out. A few students exchanged glances. Professor Zhao didn't rescue her. He simply waited. Finally, Lin Yu said, the weight distribution wasn't ideal. Which weight distribution? The upper frame. Professor Zhao turned toward the technical judge. Is that correct? The judge shook his head. No. Lin Yu's face drained of color. The judge pointed at the projection. The upper frame isn't load-bearing in this design. The angle you're describing affects the visual composition, not the structural weight. A quiet murmur moved through the hall. Professor Zhao looked back at Lin Yu. Then why did you change it? I thought. You thought. I calculated it. Show us. Lin Yu froze. The judge handed her a stylus. Your calculation. She stared at it. Her fingers tightened around the device. Then she wrote 3 numbers. The judge looked at them. These units are wrong. A few people laughed under their breath. Lin Yu's cheeks turned red. I may have made a mistake. Professor Zhao remained calm. That's understandable. For a moment, Lin Yu looked relieved. Then he continued. But mistakes are part of a genuine design process. He pointed toward the screen. So show us the mistake you made before correcting it. Lin Yu didn't move. I watched her carefully. This was the moment she had feared. A genuine creator could explain a wrong idea. A thief could only explain the final picture. Professor Zhao waited another few seconds. Then he said, Miss Lin. Lin Yu lowered the stylus. I don't remember. The hall went completely still. I lowered my eyes, not because I felt sorry for her, because I remembered saying those exact words in my previous life. I hadn't stolen anything. Yet when the judges had questioned me about one of my earliest drafts, I had panicked and forgotten a small technical detail. They had interpreted my hesitation as evidence of dishonesty. Now I understood how different the situation was. My uncertainty had come from exhaustion. Hers came from having nothing to remember. Professor Zhao closed his folder. Then we'll move to the material testing. Lin Yu's head snapped up. Professor, can we? No. His voice remained gentle. But we can proceed slowly. The technical assistant placed a tray on the table. Several samples were arranged inside. Professor Zhao pointed toward them. Which sample did you reject first? Lin Yu looked at the tray. There were 6. She pointed at number 4. 4. The judge frowned. Why? It was too rigid. No. He shook his head. Sample 4 was your supposed final reinforcement material. Lin Yu's hand dropped. The hall erupted into whispers. Professor Zhao raised one hand. Silence returned. Miss Lin, he said, your submission records claim you tested 6 materials. Yes. Your photographs show 6. Yes. Your notes describe 6. Yes. Then why can't you identify the material you supposedly rejected? Lin Yu's eyes flickered toward Mr. Gu. It lasted less than a second. But Professor Zhao saw it. So did I. And so did several people sitting nearby. Mr. Gu's expression hardened. Professor Zhao turned toward him. Mr. Gu. Yes. Were you involved in preparing Miss Lin's development records? No. The answer came too quickly. Professor Zhao raised an eyebrow. I didn't ask whether you created them. Mr. Gu's face changed. I assisted with technical formatting. Lin Yu immediately turned toward him. You said. She stopped. The hall went silent again. Mr. Gu looked at her sharply. Don't. One word. But it was enough. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. The first crack. Lin Yu had expected him to protect her. Instead, he had warned her. Professor Zhao's expression became colder. Interesting. He picked up another document. Miss Lin, your source files were uploaded from the studio workstation. Yes. Do you know who accessed that workstation before your upload? No. Mr. Gu. He shook his head. No. Professor Zhao turned toward the technical team. Bring up the access records. The screen changed. A list appeared. Dates. Times. Usernames. Lin Yu stared at it. Then her face went white. I already knew what was coming. The unauthorized access appeared on the screen. 213 Guzhan. A murmur spread through the auditorium. Mr. Gu stepped forward. That doesn't prove anything. Professor Zhao looked at him. No, it doesn't. He clicked again. Another record appeared. 221 Guzhan. Chun Mo Research Directory. My research folder. Then another. 230 Guzhan. Lin Yu Project Directory. The room became chaotic. Questions erupted from every direction. Why did he access both? Was the research copied? Was Lin Yu involved? Mr. Gu raised his voice. These logs are incomplete. Professor Zhao didn't respond. He turned toward me. Chun Mo. I stood. Yes. Did you authorize Mr. Gu to access your research? No. Did you give him permission to access your design? No. Mr. Gu suddenly pointed at me. He's lying. I looked at him. About what? You gave me access. When? You asked me to help organize your files. I never did. You did. Then show the request. His mouth closed. I waited. Nothing. Professor Zhao watched him. Mr. Gu, he didn't answer. I returned to my seat. Lin Yu was staring at me now. Her expression wasn't anger anymore. It was fear, because she was beginning to understand that I hadn't simply prepared evidence against her. I had uncovered the person standing behind her. Professor Zhao dismissed the audience for 10 minutes. The room erupted as soon as the doors opened. Students crowded into the corridor. Some whispered about Lin Yu. Others talked about Mr. Gu. Han Wei reached me. You knew. I suspected. He shook his head. You didn't tell me any of this. I didn't want you involved. He stared at me. You could have been destroyed again. I looked at him. Again. He paused. I realized my mistake. Figure of speech. He frowned but didn't press. Before we could continue, someone called my name. Chen Mo. I turned. It was Professor Zhao. Come with me. I followed him into a smaller conference room. Lin Yu was already there. So was Mr. Gu. The door closed behind us. Professor Zhao placed 3 files on the table. None of you leaves until I understand what happened. Mr. Gu immediately protested. I've done nothing wrong. Professor Zhao ignored him. He looked at Lin Yu. Did you create the design? Silence. Lin Yu lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled. Then she whispered, No. The words were barely audible. Mr. Gu's face changed. Lin Yu. She looked at him. I said no. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't create it. Professor Zhao closed his eyes briefly. And Chun Mo's design, it was his. Mr. Gu slammed his palm on the table. Don't be stupid. Lin Yu flinched. I remained silent. Professor Zhao looked at Mr. Gu. Leave. What? Leave the room. I need to explain. Not anymore. 2 committee staff members entered. Mr. Gu was escorted out. The door closed. Lin Yu covered her face. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Professor Zhao asked, What? She lowered her hands. I wanted to win. Her voice cracked. I thought if I won once, everything would change. What would change? My family. She laughed bitterly through her tears. They've spent years telling me I'm talented. My father promised to support my graduate application if I won. My mother told everyone I was going to become the next great designer. She looked at me, and then I saw his design. I said nothing. It was better than anything I had ever made. Her voice became quieter. I knew I couldn't beat it. So you stole it? Yes. The admission sat between us. Professor Zhao looked disappointed. Who helped you? Lin Yu hesitated. Then she whispered, Mr. Gu. What? I don't know. I finally spoke. You do. She looked at me. He told me there was a company interested in the material. I felt my chest tighten. What company? She shook her head. He never gave me the full name. You knew he copied my research. I knew he took something. You knew. She started crying again. I didn't know what he would do with it. I looked at her. That was the first honest thing she had said. Not an excuse. Not a performance. Just fear. But honesty didn't erase consequences. Professor Zhao closed the file. Miss Lin, you are suspended from the competition pending investigation. She nodded. No argument. No tears this time. She simply sat there. I stood. Professor Zhao looked at me. Chen Mo. Yes. You were remarkably restrained. I didn't know what to say. He continued. Why didn't you confront her earlier? I looked through the glass window. Outside, students were still gathered in small groups. Because I wanted the truth to survive without me forcing it. Professor Zhao studied me. Then he nodded. That was wise. As I left the room, Lin Yu called after me. Chen Mo. I stopped. She hesitated. I know you hate me. I turned around. I don't. She looked confused. I don't have enough energy to hate you. Her eyes reddened. I just don't want you in my life anymore. I walked away. Behind me, she whispered, I understand. For the first time, I believed her. But I had no idea that the biggest secret had not yet been revealed. Because when I returned to the studio that afternoon, my laptop was gone. And on my desk sat a single sheet of paper. You found the wrong person. I stared at the empty space where my laptop had been. Han Wei rushed into the studio. What happened? Someone took it. His face changed. Your laptop? Yes. Was it locked? Yes. Password? Strong. He looked around. Then why are you so calm? I picked up the paper. The handwriting was unfamiliar. You think this is connected? I know it is. Hanwei glanced toward the security camera. Let's check the footage. We went to the security office. The guard pulled up the recordings. At 2:14 p.m., students entered and left. At 2:21, the corridor was empty. At 2:23, a figure entered the studio. The face was hidden beneath a cap. The person walked directly to my desk. Didn't hesitate. Didn't search. They knew exactly where the laptop was. Hanwei leaned closer. Can we zoom in? The guard did. The image became blurry. But one detail remained visible. A silver watch. Hanwei suddenly went quiet. What? He pointed. That watch. I looked. Whose? I've seen it before. Where? He swallowed. On Professor Zhao's assistant. I frowned. Are you sure? Almost. We found the assistant in the administrative office. His name was Qiao Sheng. He was 26, quiet, meticulous, and rarely spoke unless necessary. When we showed him the footage, his face became pale. That isn't me. Hanwei crossed his arms. Then why are you nervous? Because... Qiao Sheng stopped. I looked at him. Because what? He sat down. Then he whispered. I was told to erase the camera footage. My stomach tightened. By whom? He looked toward the door. Mr. Gu. Did you erase it? No. Why? Because I thought it was suspicious. He reached into his desk drawer. Then he pulled out a small flash drive. I copied the footage first. I stared at it. Why get it to me? Because I don't think Mr. Gu was working alone. Hanwei looked at me. Who else? Qiao Sheng hesitated. Someone from Huasheng. I took the drive. Name? I don't know. Then what do you know? He lowered his voice. I heard Mr. Gu talking to someone last week. What did they say? Something about the prototype. My pulse quickened. The material? Yes. What else? Qiao Sheng swallowed. They said once the competition ended, the company would acquire the design rights. I closed my eyes. So that was the plan. The competition was never just about Lin Yu winning. They wanted my research transferred under someone else's name. And if Lin Yu won using my design, the ownership trail would become complicated enough for them to exploit. I looked at Qiao Sheng. Why did you help me? He smiled bitterly. Because my older brother worked for that company. And he was fired after refusing to sign a document transferring his research. That explained the fear in his eyes. He wasn't brave. He was simply tired of being afraid. I thanked him. Then I returned to the dormitory. My laptop was still missing. But I didn't panic. The important files weren't on it anymore. Before leaving the competition building, I had already backed everything up. The thief had taken a shell. Nothing more. Yet something bothered me. The note. You found the wrong person. If they wanted to scare me, they could have written anything. Why that sentence? I opened the flash drive Qiao Sheng gave me. There was a folder containing the corridor footage. Another contained internal emails. And a third folder. Transfer agreement, draft. I opened it. The document described a future commercial partnership. The designer's name was blank. But the company would receive exclusive rights to the material prototype. I scrolled down. At the bottom was a list of required supporting documents. Competition placement. Development records. Original creator verification. My blood ran cold. They needed the competition to establish a false creator. But there was one problem. The creator field was blank, which meant they hadn't decided whether to use Lin Yu or someone else. I read the document again. Then I noticed the creation date. The agreement had been drafted 3 weeks before Lin Yu stole my design. That meant the theft had been planned before she even knew whether she could win. I sat back. The room suddenly felt colder. Lin Yu hadn't started this. She had been recruited into it. But who had chosen her? I called Professor Zhao. He answered quickly. Chun Mo, I need to show you something. Come to my office. I went immediately. He read the agreement without speaking. When he finished, his face was grim. This is serious. Yes. Where did you get it? That's not important. As if this becomes evidence. I have backups. He looked at me. You expected this. I expected someone to try. Professor Zhao stood. I'm going to contact the university administration. Not yet. He frowned. What? Because whoever is behind this knows we're investigating. He looked at me carefully. What do you intend to do? Nothing. He sighed. You keep saying that. Because they're still moving. He understood. You want them to expose themselves. Yes. He was silent. Then he said, there's something you should know. What? Huaxing's representative requested access to the competition archive yesterday. I froze. Who approved it? No one. Then how do they access it? Professor Zhao looked uncomfortable. Someone inside the university gave them temporary credentials. I knew what that meant. The network was larger than I thought. This wasn't just Mr. Gu. It wasn't just Lin Yu. And it wasn't even only the competition. Someone inside the university had been helping them. Professor Zhao walked to the window. I'll investigate quietly. Thank you. As I turned to leave, he said, Chen Mo. I stopped. You don't have to carry this alone. I looked at him. For a moment, I almost told him everything. About the life I remembered. About the day I had lost everything. About knowing which people would betray me. But I couldn't. Some truths were too strange to explain. So I simply said, I know. That night, Lin Yu called me. I almost ignored it. Then I answered, hello. For several seconds, there was only breathing. Then she said, Mr. Gu disappeared. I frowned. What? He didn't answer my calls. Why are you calling me? Because before he left, he sent me a message. What did it say? Her voice shook. He told me that if anything happened, I should never mention the company. I closed my eyes. Did he say which company? No. Did he threaten you? Silence. Yes. How? He said if I talked, my father's business would be investigated. My expression hardened. So now you understand. What? This was never just about winning. She started crying. I know. I remained silent. Then she said something I hadn't expected. Chen Mo. Yes. I can help you. I laughed softly. You've already helped enough. I mean it. What? Because I finally understand what I did. Her voice became steadier. And because I know where Mr. Gu kept the original files. My hand tightened around the phone. Where? The old materials archive. I stood. Are you sure? Yes. Why would he keep them there? Because he told me once that no one checks the old archive. I grabbed my jacket. Don't go there. Why? Because if he knows you told me, he'll know what we're looking for. She was silent. Then she asked, do you trust me? I looked at the dark window. No. Her breathing stopped. But I continued, I believe you. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, that's enough. The call ended. I stood alone in the room. The old archive. That was where my original design records had been stored in my previous life. I had forgotten about them. But Mr. Gu hadn't. If those records still existed, they could prove exactly when my design was created. And perhaps they could reveal who had ordered the theft. I left the dormitory. The university corridors were almost empty. As I approached the old archive building, I noticed the lights were already on. Someone was inside. I stopped outside the door. Through the glass, I saw a man standing beside the shelves. He turned. Even from a distance, I recognized him. Mr. Gu. He was holding a cardboard box. And beside him stood a stranger wearing the Huaxing logo. I reached for my phone. Then I heard the stranger say, Chen Mo knows. Mr. Gu answered quietly. Then we don't have much time. The stranger looked toward the door. Does he know about the second copy? Mr. Gu shook his head. No. I froze. Second copy? The stranger smiled. Good. Then he opened the box. Inside was my original design notebook. And beneath it, a second folder bearing my name. I stepped back into the darkness. For the first time since returning to this life, I felt something close to fear. Not because they had my work, because I had no idea what else they had taken from me. I stayed in the darkness outside the archive room. Through the glass, I could see Mr. Gu and the Huaxing representative standing over the box. My original notebook lay on top. Beneath it was the second folder. My name was printed across the tab. Chen Mo, Material Research. I had never seen that folder before. The stranger opened it. Is everything here? Mr. Gu nodded. Most of it. Most. There were some files he kept separately. The stranger's expression darkened. Then find them. I already tried. Try harder. Mr. Gu lowered his voice. You don't understand. He changed. The stranger laughed. People don't change overnight. I almost smiled. He had no idea how wrong he was. I quietly stepped away from the door. I didn't need to hear more. Not yet. The important thing was that the second folder existed, and now I knew they had it. I took out my phone and sent one message to Professor Zhao. They're in the old archive. 2 people. Come quietly. Then I sent another to Qiao Shang. Do not come here. Keep the original camera footage safe. I put the phone away. Then I walked around the building. There was an old emergency entrance at the rear. It had been broken for years. I remembered it from my previous life. I pushed the door. It opened. Inside, the archive smelled of dust and old paper. I moved between the shelves until I reached the back storage area. The lights from the main room cast long shadows across the floor. I could hear the 2 men talking. Why was Chunmo's research so valuable? The stranger asked. Mr. Gu answered. Because the material isn't just strong. What else? It can be manufactured cheaply. The stranger was silent. Then he said, that changes everything. I stopped. So that was the reason. My research wasn't valuable because of the competition. It was valuable because it could be mass-produced. I had spent months thinking I was designing a student project. In reality, I had stumbled into something with commercial value. Mr. Gu continued. The company wants exclusive rights before anyone realizes what they have. And the competition, once Lin Yu wins, we can establish her as the creator. And Chun Mo, he'll be discredited. The stranger laughed. Exactly. My hand became cold. That was the entire plan. Not just stealing my design, destroying my credibility so I couldn't later claim ownership. The footsteps moved closer. I pressed myself against the shelves. Mr. Gu walked past. The stranger followed. They stopped a few meters away. Take the folder, the stranger said. Mr. Gu reached for it. At that moment, the archive door opened. Professor Zhao stepped inside. Put it down. Both men froze. Mr. Gu turned. Professor. Professor Zhao walked forward. His expression was colder than I had ever seen. I said, put down. The Huaxing representative immediately stepped back. This is university property. Then why are you removing it? We're conducting a review. Without authorization? The man said nothing. Professor Zhao looked at Mr. Gu. You've been suspended from access to the archive. Mr. Gu's face hardened. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand enough. Then I stepped out from behind the shelves. Professor Zhao is right. Mr. Gu stared at me. His face lost all color. You. I walked toward the table. I've been looking for this. He instinctively moved between me and the folder. I stopped. Move. No. Then I'll ask Professor Zhao to move it for you. Professor Zhao stepped forward. Mr. Gu finally backed away. I picked up the second folder. My fingers shook slightly, not from fear, from a realization that this folder contained pieces of my work I had never known were missing. I opened it. Research notes, material testing results, photographs, even handwritten observations from my first prototype. But there was something else, a printed email. I read it. The message had been sent from an executive at Huaxing. Once Chun Mo's ownership is disputed, proceed with the transfer through the competition sponsor. My eyes narrowed. Below that was another line. Lin Yu is acceptable as the public creator. I looked at her name. Acceptable. Not important. Not respected. Just useful. I felt no satisfaction. Only disappointment. She had ruined her own reputation for people who never intended to value her. The Huaxing representative reached for the folder. Give that to me. I stepped back. No. You don't understand the legal implications. I understand enough. He smiled. You're a student, and you're trespassing. His smile disappeared. Professor Zhao stepped between us. Leave. The man stared at him. You'll regret this. Professor Zhao didn't move. So will you. The man left. Mr. Gu remained. He looked at me. You think you've won? No. Then why are you smiling? I've stopped caring about winning. His face twisted. You're lying. Maybe. I closed the folder. That's the difference between us. He stared at me. I walked away. Outside the archive, the night air felt different. For the first time, I wasn't running after evidence. I had it. And more importantly, Professor Zhao had seen it. There was no way to quietly erase everything anymore. But the next morning brought another surprise. The university announced that the competition was being suspended. Not canceled. Suspended. pending investigation into irregularities involving intellectual property and external sponsorship. Students flooded the campus forums. Rumors spread everywhere. Some said Lin Yu had cheated. Others claimed I had fabricated the evidence. A few claimed the entire competition was corrupt. I ignored all of it. Then someone knocked on my dorm room door. It was Lin Yu. She stood outside with no makeup, no carefully arranged hair, no confident smile. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She entered. For several seconds, she just stood there. Then she said, "My father knows." I didn't respond. "He knows I stole your design. That isn't my problem." "I know." She looked down. "He called me this morning." "What did he say?" "That I had embarrassed the family." I almost laughed. "Not that you stole someone's work?" She shook her head. "No." Her voice was bitter. "He said the only thing that mattered was that I got caught." That sentence told me everything. Her father wasn't angry because she had done something wrong. He was angry because she had failed. Lin Yu sat down. I thought if I won, people would finally respect me. I remained standing. "They might have." She looked up. "Do you really think so?" "No." Her eyes filled with tears. "I deserve that. You deserve the consequences." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat in silence. Then she reached in her bag. "I brought something." She handed me a small envelope. I opened it. Inside were printed messages. Between her and Mr. Gu. Dates. Times. Instructions. One message made my blood run cold. "Don't worry about Chinemo. If he resists, we already have a backup accusation." I looked at her. "What is this?" "I saved them before deleting my account." "Why?" "Because I was scared." She looked away. I thought I might need protection. For once, I believed her completely. I put the messages on the table. "This helps." "I know." She stood. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good." She nodded. At the door, she stopped. "Chinemo." "Yes." "I used to think you were arrogant." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. "You never begged anyone for approval." She looked at the floor. "I hated that about you." "Why?" "Because I wanted to be like that." Then she left. I watched the door close. I didn't forgive her, but I no longer needed to hate her. That night, Professor Zhao called me. "The university is opening a formal hearing." "When?" "Tomorrow." "Public?" "Yes." "Who will attend?" "University officials. Competition judges. Huasheng representatives." He paused. "And your classmates?" I looked out the window. "So everyone gets to hear the truth." "Yes." I nodded. "Good." Then he said something unexpected. "Chinemo, there's one more thing." "What?" The second folder wasn't complete. My eyes narrowed. What was missing? The original research contract. "What contract?" "The one establishing you as the creator of the material prototype." I went silent. Professor Zhao continued. "It may have been removed years ago." "Years?" "Yes." "Before the competition?" "Much earlier." I felt a chill move through me. That was impossible. My prototype had only existed for months. Unless someone had known about my research long before the competition. Someone had been watching it develop. Professor Zhao lowered his voice. "We need to find out who." I stared at the darkness outside. The competition had begun with a stolen design. Now, it had become something much larger. And somewhere in the university's records was a missing contract that could explain everything. The hearing began at 10. The auditorium was full. Students filled the upper rows. Faculty members sat near the front. 3 representatives from Huasheng occupied a table on the right. Professor Zhao sat in the center. Lin Yu sat alone on the opposite side. Mr. Gu was not there. I wondered where he had gone. Then the university secretary stood. "This hearing concerns allegations of intellectual property theft, academic misconduct, unauthorized access to research records, and improper external interference in a national student competition." A wave of whispers moved through the room. The secretary continued. "Evidence will be presented in sequence." Professor Zhao took the microphone. "The first question is simple." He looked toward the audience. "Who created the design submitted under Lin Yu's name?" The screen displayed my original sketches, then the final design, then the timestamps, then photographs from the materials lab. One after another, my development process appeared. Nothing dramatic. No clever trick, just months of work. The judges watched silently. Then Professor Zhao asked Lin Yu to stand. She did. Did you create this? No. Her answer was clear. The room erupted. Professor Zhao raised his hand. Silence. Who did? Lin Yu looked at me. Chen Mo. The words echoed through the auditorium. Professor Zhao nodded. Did he give you permission to submit it? No. Did you steal it? Yes. There was no hesitation. The confession landed harder than any accusation could have. I watched her face. She wasn't performing anymore. She looked exhausted. Professor Zhao turned toward the judges. Now we address how the theft occurred. The screen changed. Server logs appeared. The unauthorized access. The copied research. The connection between my account and Lin Yu's folder. Then the messages between Lin Yu and Mr. Gu. The audience grew increasingly restless. One of the Huasheng representatives stood. These communications are being taken out of context. Professor Zhao looked at him, then explained the context. The man hesitated. We were evaluating potential student innovation. Without authorization, we had sponsorship rights, not ownership rights. Silence. The representative sat down. Professor Zhao turned to the next document. The transfer agreement. The room became silent. My name appeared. Then Lin Yu's. Then the clause assigning commercial rights to the company. Someone in the audience whispered. They planned it before she even stole the design. Professor Zhao nodded. Exactly. Then he looked toward the Huasheng table. Who authorized this agreement? The representative refused to answer. We will need legal counsel before responding. Of course. Professor Zhao turned to me. Chinamo, would you like to speak? I stood. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. In my previous life, I had stood in this same room. I had cried. I had shouted. I had begged people to believe me. This time, I didn't need to. I looked at the screen. My design was stolen. I paused. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. The room became completely silent. I only want the record to be accurate. I pointed toward the evidence. These files existed before Lin Yu submitted anything. Then I looked toward her. She made a serious mistake. Lin Yu lowered her head. But she wasn't the only person involved. I turned toward the Huasheng representatives. And she wasn't the person who planned this. One representative stood again. That's speculation. I shook my head. No. I held up the transfer agreement. This was created 3 weeks before my design was submitted. Then I held up the messages. These were written before the complaint against me. Finally, I held up the archive records. And these show unauthorized access to my research. I looked at Professor Zhao. The evidence speaks for itself. I sat down. Nobody applauded. That was fine. This wasn't a performance. The hearing continued for another hour. By the end, the university announced several immediate actions. Mr. Gu's access was permanently revoked pending investigation. The competition results were voided. Lin Yu was disqualified. Huasheng's sponsorship agreement was suspended. And my design was officially recognized as the original submission. But Professor Zhao wasn't finished. There is one unresolved issue. He looked toward the university administration. The missing research contract. A senior administrator stood. We are investigating the archive. Professor Zhao shook his head. Don't. Everyone looked at him. He continued. Search the legal records. The administrator frowned. Why? Because the contract wasn't created by the competition. The room became silent. Professor Zhao looked at me. It was created when Chen Mo first joined the university research program. I stared at him. I never signed one. That's the problem. The administrator looked confused. What are you suggesting? Professor Zhao replied. Someone registered Chen Mo's research under another name. The room erupted. I felt my heartbeat change. Another name. Professor Zhao handed the administrator document. Find the original registration. The administrator took it. Then his expression changed. He looked up. Professor. What? The registered researcher is not a student. Who? The administrator hesitated. Then he said the name. Gu Zhen. My mind went blank. Mr. Gu. He hadn't discovered my research by accident. He had registered it under his own name months before the competition. That meant the theft had begun long before Lin Yu. The entire auditorium was silent. Then the doors opened. Everyone turned. Mr. Gu stood there. 2 university security officers were behind him. He looked older than yesterday, exhausted, but he was smiling. He walked slowly toward the center. You finally found it. Professor Zhao stood. What did you do? Mr. Gu looked at me. I didn't steal your research. I stared at him. You registered it. He smiled. Yes. Why? Because you were too young to understand its value. My hands tightened. You had no right. No. His smile disappeared. But I knew what it could become. Professor Zhao's voice hardened. You manipulated the competition. Mr. Gu laughed softly. The competition was only the final step. The room became silent. He looked at me. I knew about your material before you even understood what you had created. I couldn't speak. He continued. You were brilliant, Chinemo. There was something almost admiring in his voice. That's why I couldn't simply destroy you. He looked around the auditorium. I needed your work to become someone else's first. My stomach turned. Lin Yu. Yes. You used her. Yes. She wasn't supposed to win. Mr. Gu smiled. She was supposed to make the ownership dispute messy enough that no one could prove anything. Lin Yu began crying silently. Mr. Gu glanced at her. She was convenient. That sentence broke something in her expression. She lowered her head. Professor Zhao stepped forward. You're finished. Mr. Gu didn't resist when security took his arms. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. You think this is over? I met his eyes. No. His smile returned. Good. Then he disappeared through the doors. The auditorium remained silent. I looked at the empty doorway. For years, I thought my greatest enemy was Lin Yu. She wasn't. She had simply been the first person I could see. The real betrayal had been hiding behind paperwork, signatures, and authority. And now that truth was finally visible. Professor Zhao walked toward me. You did well. I shook my head. No. He looked surprised. I survived. I looked at the sunlight coming through the tall auditorium windows. That isn't the same thing. He smiled. Perhaps. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. What is this? The original contract. I opened it. My name was written clearly. Researcher, Chun Mo. Below was another line. Intellectual property, solely owned by the researcher. I stared at it. For the first time in 2 lives, my name was attached to my work. No one else's. And somehow, that mattered more than winning any competition. Outside, students began leaving the auditorium. The rumors would continue. The investigation would take months. Mr. Gu would face consequences. Huashen would have to answer questions. Lin Yu would have to live with what she had done. But I didn't need to watch any of it. I had already spent one life waiting for other people to decide my worth. This time, I was walking away. Not defeated. Not triumphant. Free. 3 months after the hearing, the university corridor no longer went quiet when I walked through it. That surprised me. For weeks after everything collapsed, I had expected whispers. Some remained. A few students still glanced at me and lowered their voices. But most people had moved on. That was the strange thing about public humiliation. When it happens to you, it feels like the entire world is watching. Then one morning, you realize the world has other things to worry about. I was standing outside the materials laboratory when Professor Zhao approached. You're late. I checked my watch. I'm 3 minutes early. He looked at the clock, then at me. Then the clock is wrong. I smiled. You haven't changed. Neither have you. He handed me a folder. I opened it. Inside was a letter from a research institute in Shanghai. They want you to join their summer program, he said. I looked up. Me? Yes. Why? Professor Zhao gave me a strange look. Because you're good. I almost laughed. 3 months ago, I would have needed someone to tell me that. Now I simply closed the folder. What would I be doing? Developing your material prototype. Under whose name? He smiled. Yours. I looked down at the letter again. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My entire first life had been spent trying to prove that my work belonged to me. Now someone was offering me a place where that question didn't even need to be asked. I'll think about it. You already know your answer. Probably. He walked away. I remained outside the laboratory. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the floor. I could hear students talking inside. Someone laughed. A printer hummed. A professor argued about measurements. Ordinary sounds. Peaceful sounds. I had once thought peace would feel dramatic. It didn't. It felt like this. A normal afternoon where nobody was trying to take something from me. I entered the lab. Hanwei was already there. He looked up. You got the letter? Yeah. Shanghai. Maybe. He grinned. You're going. Maybe. You always say maybe when you already decided. I put down my bag. What are you doing? Helping you test the new prototype. I stared at him. You don't have to. I know. He shrugged. I'm doing it anyway. That sentence stayed with me. There is a difference between someone helping you because they expected something in return and someone helping because they wanted to. I had learned to recognize it. We spent the afternoon testing the material. The first sample cracked. The second warped. The third held. Hanwei looked at the result. That's better. Barely. Still better. I smiled. Run it again. He nodded. For the next few hours, we worked. No competition. No judges. No cameras. Just two people trying to make something better. At sunset, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. Hello. A woman's voice came through. Chen Mo? Yes. This is Lin Yu. I was silent. She continued quickly. I know you don't want to hear from me. Then why call? I wanted to tell you something. I leaned against the laboratory table. What? I withdrew from the university competition program. I know. She was quiet. You already knew? Yes. I also told the disciplinary committee everything. That was your choice. I know. Her voice became softer. My father cut off my financial support. I didn't respond. I had to move out of my apartment. Still nothing. I thought you'd be happy. I frowned. Why? Because I hurt you. I wanted the truth. You got it. Yes. She breathed slowly. Then why don't I feel better? I looked toward the window. Because consequences aren't revenge. She was silent. I continued. You thought losing everything would make you feel the same pain I felt. Didn't it? No. Why? Because you lost what you built on someone else's work. I paused. I lost what I built myself. The line went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was different. I understand now. I didn't know whether she truly did. But I didn't need to. She asked, Do you hate me? No. Why? Because I don't want you occupying that much space in my head. She laughed softly. A sad laugh. That sounds like something you'd say. Probably. She hesitated. I started designing again. I smiled faintly. Good. It's terrible. Then make it better. I will. Another silence. Then she said, Chen Mo. Yes. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I looked at the fading light. I didn't save you. I know. You faced what you did. Yes. That's different. She understood. Goodbye. Goodbye. The call ended. Hanwei looked at me. Was that her? Yes. What did she want? Closure. Did she get it? I thought for a moment. Maybe. He nodded. Then he pointed toward the testing table. Your material is smoking. I turned. Damn. We rushed toward the equipment. The sample had overheated. Hanwei laughed. You almost burned your masterpiece. I opened the chamber. It's not a masterpiece. Not yet. His words made me stop. Not yet. That was the difference. Before, I believed every project had to prove my worth. Now I simply wanted to improve it. The next morning, I submitted my application for the Shanghai research program. Then I did something else. I created a new folder. Not for evidence. Not for backups. Not for protecting myself from betrayal. Just for my work. I labeled it Project Horizon. For the first time, I didn't create 3 copies because I was afraid someone would steal them. I created 3 copies because I wanted to protect something I cared about. That difference mattered. A week later, Professor Zhao called me into his office. There has been an update. About Mr. Gu? Yes. I sat down. The university investigation found that he had accessed research records belonging to at least 12 students. My expression tightened. 12. Yes. Was my project the only one he transferred? No. Professor Zhao placed another folder on the desk. He had been doing this for years. I opened it. Names. Projects. Dates. Some students had graduated. Others had abandoned their research. One had left the university entirely. I looked at Professor Zhao. What happens to them? We're reopening their cases. Good. He nodded. Then he added, There's something else. I looked up. Huasheng has offered to settle. How? Financial compensation. I closed the folder. No. He smiled. I thought you'd say that. I'm not interested. Why? Because money doesn't make the work mine. He leaned back. Then what do you want? I thought about it. I want the university to establish a proper intellectual property system for student researchers. Professor Zhao's expression became serious. That's ambitious. It shouldn't be. He nodded slowly. You're right. I stood. That's all. As I reached the door, he called after me. Chinemo. I turned. You've changed. I smiled. I think I finally stopped trying to become someone else. The Shanghai Research Institute was larger than I expected. Glass walls, long laboratories, rows of equipment I'd only seen in academic papers. On my first day, a researcher named Dr. Shun showed me around. You'll have your own workstation. Really, your project, your workstation. She handed me an access card. Your research remains under your name unless you sign otherwise. I stared at the card. It was such a simple thing, yet my fingers tightened around it. Dr. Shun noticed. You okay? Yes. She smiled. Good. She led me into the laboratory. A dozen researchers were working quietly. No one knew my entire story. No one cared about the scandal. To them, I was simply a student with an interesting prototype. It was strangely liberating. Over the next several weeks, I worked harder than I ever had. Not because I was afraid of losing, because I wanted to know how far the material could go. My first major test failed. The second failed worse. The third caused a small equipment malfunction that left smoke hanging above the testing chamber. Dr. Shun stood beside me. You look disappointed. I am. Why? Because I thought I had solved it. She smiled. You thought wrong. I looked at her. That's normal. She handed me a notebook. Research isn't about being right the first time. I laughed. I needed to hear that. No. She shook her head. You needed to believe it. I looked down. She was right. For years, I had treated mistakes like threats. One mistake could be used against me. One weakness could become someone's weapon. So I had learned to hide mistakes. Now I was in a place where mistakes were data. That changed everything. I began documenting failures honestly. The cracks, the deformations, the temperature changes, the pressure points. Every failed experiment became useful. 3 months later, the material passed its first full stress test. The laboratory erupted in applause. I stood behind the glass, staring at the intact structure. Dr. Shun smiled. Congratulations. I shook my head. We still need to repeat it. She laughed. You really don't celebrate, do you? Not yet. Then celebrate when you deserve it. I smiled. Deal. That evening, I received an email. The university had officially revised its student research policy. Every student researcher would now have clear ownership records. Every project would have independent backups. No staff member could access private research without documented permission. And every external sponsorship agreement would require student consent. At the bottom was a note. Policy revision initiated following the Chun MO case. I read it twice, then closed the email. I didn't feel proud. I felt relieved. Maybe my experience could prevent someone else from losing years of their life. That was enough. A week later, Han Wei visited Shanghai. He walked into the laboratory carrying 2 cups of coffee. Still alive? Barely. He handed me one. I heard you're publishing. Soon. He grinned. You know what's funny? What? Back at university, everyone thought you were finished. I smiled. They were wrong. They were. He sat down. Lin Yu's doing okay too. I looked at him. You keep track. She posts occasionally. I nodded. What is she doing? Small design work. Good. She doesn't use her old name professionally anymore. I looked at him. Why? Maybe she's trying to build something without the family name. I considered that. That would be better. Han Wei smiled. You really don't care anymore. I looked through the glass of my prototype. I care. About her? No. About the past? No. Then, I touched the edge of the table. About what I build next. He nodded. That sounds more like you. After he left, I stayed in the laboratory. The city lights reflected against the glass. I remembered the auditorium, the stolen design, the accusations, the humiliation. The night I had discovered the unauthorized login. The old archive. Lin Yu's confession. Mr. Gu's smile. All of it felt distant. Not forgotten, just no longer powerful. I opened my project notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Project Horizon, Revision 27. Then beneath it, Failure, Structural Weakness at High Temperature. I smiled. There had been a time when writing down a failure would have terrified me. Now I wrote it proudly, because it was mine. The next morning, Dr. Shun entered the laboratory. We received an invitation. For what? National Innovation Exhibition. I looked up. My material? Yes. Under my name? Yes. I stared at the invitation. The first competition had taught me how quickly applause could disappear. This one didn't matter for the same reason. I wasn't entering to prove anyone wrong. I wasn't trying to beat Lin Yu. I wasn't trying to punish Mr. Gu. I wasn't even trying to repair my reputation. I simply wanted to show what I had built. I signed the form. Dr. Shin looked at me. Ready? I put down the pen. Yes. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. Congratulations, Chinemo. You finally have something worth protecting. I stared at the screen. For a moment, the old fear returned. Then I deleted the message. Not because I was ignoring danger. Because this time, I knew the difference between being prepared and being afraid. I looked at the laboratory around me. The equipment. The notebooks. The unfinished prototypes. The people who respected my work. My life was no longer a courtroom. It was a workshop, and I had finally learned how to live in it. The National Innovation Exhibition opened on a bright Saturday morning. Thousands of people filled the convention center. Researchers moved between displays. Investors spoke quietly in glass meeting rooms. Students stood beside prototypes they had spent months building. I stood behind my own display, looking at the name printed on the plaque. Chun Mo, Project Horizon. No borrowed name. No sponsor's name replacing mine. No asterisk. Just mine. Dr. Shun approached with 2 cups of coffee. You're staring at it again. I know. Still surprised? A little. She handed me the cup. You should get used to it. I smiled. I'll try. The first visitors arrived. I explained the material. Its flexibility. Its structural strength. Its manufacturing cost. Its limitations. Its future applications. Some people asked difficult questions. I answered the ones I knew. For the ones I didn't, I simply said, I don't know yet. The words felt strangely easy. I didn't need to pretend anymore. Around noon, a delegation from a major engineering company stopped at the display. Their lead researcher examined the prototype. This could have commercial applications. It could. Have you considered licensing? Not yet. Why? Because I want to finish the research first. He smiled. Good answer. He handed me his card. We'd like to talk when you're ready. I accepted it. Thank you. After they left, Dr. Shun looked at me. You didn't even negotiate. I'm not ready. That's reasonable. She smiled. Old Chinemo would have tried to prove the material was perfect. I laughed. Old Chinemo had terrible judgment. New Chinemo? Still learning. She nodded. That might be the healthiest answer I've heard all week. The afternoon passed quickly. Then I heard a familiar voice. Chinemo. I turned. Lin Yu stood several meters away. For a second, the exhibition hall disappeared. She looked different. Not dramatically. Just simpler. Her clothes were plain. Her hair was tied back. No crowd surrounded her. No one whispered her name. She held a small portfolio. Congratulations, she said. I looked at her. Thank you. I saw your project online. You came for the exhibition? Yes. She hesitated. I have my own work here. I smiled. That's good. She looked at my display. It's impressive. It isn't finished. I know. She smiled. You always say that. I almost laughed. You remember? Some things. There was no bitterness in her voice. She stood quietly for a moment. Then she handed me her portfolio. I brought something. I looked at it. What is it? My design. I opened a portfolio. Inside were several sketches. They were rough. Uneven. Nothing like my stolen design. But they were hers. I studied them. You made these? Yes. Without copying anyone. She looked at me. Yes. I nodded. Then keep going. Her eyes became wet. That's all. What do you want me to say? I don't know. I closed the portfolio. You don't need my approval. She looked down. I used to. I know. And now? Now you have to decide whether you respect your own work. She looked at the sketches. I think I do. Then that's enough. She smiled. A real smile. Not the polished expression I remembered from the competition stage. Thank you. You don't owe me thanks. I know. She took the portfolio back. Then she turned to leave. After a few steps, she stopped. Chinemo. I looked up. If I hadn't stolen your design, I waited. Would we have ever been friends? I thought about it. No. She nodded. I thought so. She walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd. There was no anger in me. No desire to see her fail. Only the quiet understanding that some people belong in your past for a reason. Dr. Shun came beside me. Was that her? Yes. Are you okay? I looked at the exhibition hall. Yes. And I meant it. That evening, the organizers announced the final awards. Project Horizon received the highest innovation award. When my name was called, the hall erupted in applause. I walked onto the stage. The trophy was handed to me. The lights were bright. Cameras flashed. For a moment, I remembered another stage. Another trophy. Another version of myself standing in the shadows. The difference was enormous. Back then, I had wanted people to believe I was the creator. Now everyone already knew. The host handed me the microphone. Chinemo, what does this award mean to you? I looked at the audience. Then at the trophy. It means I still have a lot to learn. The host laughed. That's a humble answer. I smiled. But honestly, I'm more grateful for the process than the award. Why? Because the mistakes were mine too. The hall became quiet. I continued. And that's something I didn't understand before. I looked down at the trophy. Ownership isn't just having your name printed on something. I paused. It's having the courage to admit every mistake that brought you there. The applause came slowly, then louder. I stepped away from the microphone. This time, I didn't look for anyone in the audience. I didn't need to. 6 months later, I returned to my old university. Not as a student, not as a finalist, as a guest researcher. The invitation had come from Professor Zhao. The university had established a new student innovation center. A plaque near the entrance read, Independent Student Research and Intellectual Property Center. I stood before it for a long time. Professor Zhao came beside me. You like it? Yes. You're responsible for half of this. I didn't build it. You gave us the reason. I shook my head. The students built it. He smiled. Still modest. Still honest. He laughed. Inside, students were working on prototypes. Some were arguing over measurements. Others were testing materials. One group had 3 failed models scattered across a table. I stopped. What's wrong? A nervous student explained. Our structure keeps collapsing. Show me. He handed me the model. I examined it. You've reinforced the wrong section. He looked confused. Why? I explained the stress distribution. He listened carefully. Then he asked, How did you learn this? I smiled. By making the wrong decision many times. He laughed. Can you help us? I looked at the prototype. Of course. For the next hour, we worked together. No cameras. No applause. No competition. Just students trying to solve a problem. When I finally left the lab, Professor Zhao was waiting outside. You've changed. I smiled. You said that before. This time I mean it differently. Ow, you used to want to prove that you were right. He looked through the glass at the students. Now you want other people to succeed. I considered his words. Maybe he was right. My first life had taught me how easily trust could be abused. My second chance had taught me something more important. Being betrayed didn't mean I had to become incapable of trusting. It meant I needed to choose carefully. That afternoon, I visited the old competition auditorium. The seats were empty. Dust floated through the sunlight. I walked to the stage. This was where Lin Yu had once held my design, where I had stood silently while everyone applauded her, where my old life had begun to collapse. I stood there for a moment. Then I laughed quietly. The memory no longer hurt. That surprised me. I had spent so long believing healing meant forgetting. It didn't. Healing meant remembering without wanting to go back. I walked down the steps. At the entrance, I saw a familiar face. Xiao Sheng. He smiled. Long time. Very long. How's Shanghai? Busy. Still researching? Every day. He nodded. Good. I looked at him. What about you? I transferred to the research administration office. That's a good place for you. He laughed. I finally learned that keeping records can save lives. I smiled. It can. We stood there for a moment. Then he said, "Do you ever think about what happened?" "Sometimes." "Do you regret anything?" I thought carefully. "I regret trusting the wrong people." He nodded. "But I don't regret being someone who trusted." He looked surprised. "Why?" "Because if I let one betrayal turn me into someone who trusts nobody, then the people who hurt me still control me." Xiaosheng smiled. "That sounds like something worth remembering." "It is." That evening, I returned to Shanghai. My apartment was small. The city outside was loud. Cars moved beneath the streetlights. Someone in the neighboring building was playing music. I opened my notebook. The first page contained the words, "Project Horizon, Revision 27. I turned the page. New experiments, new ideas, new failures, new possibilities. I picked up my pen. Then I wrote, "Project Horizon, Revision 63. I stopped. For a moment, I thought about the title that had once defined my life. The stolen design, the popular girl, the accusation, the investigation, the people who had tried to make me doubt my own work. They had all wanted the same thing. They wanted me to believe that my worth depended on whether other people recognized it. They were wrong. The design had been mine before anyone applauded. It remained mine when everyone accused me, and it would remain mine even if nobody remembered my name. That was the lesson I had needed 2 lives to understand." A knock came at the door. I opened it. Dr. Shin stood outside. "You're still working?" "Yes. It's almost midnight." "I know." She held out a folder. "New research proposal." I took it. "What is it?" "A joint project." I looked at her. "Who with?" "Your university." I smiled. "Professor Zhao?" "Yes." I opened the folder. The project involved developing affordable structural materials for schools and public buildings. The goal wasn't awards. It wasn't commercial prestige. It was practical, useful, something that could help people. I looked up. "When do we start?" "Monday." I nodded. "Then Monday." She smiled. "Good night, Chinemo." "Good night." The door closed. I returned to my desk. Outside, the city continued moving. Inside, my notebook remained open. I looked at the empty page. Then I began writing. Not about the past. Not about revenge. Not about the people who had betrayed me. About what came next. Because eventually, there comes a moment when surviving is no longer enough. You have to decide what kind of life you want after survival. I had once thought my greatest victory would be watching the people who hurt me fall. I was wrong. The greatest victory was waking up every morning without needing them to fall at all. I put down my pen. The room was quiet. For the first time, silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. And as I turned off the light, I understood something simple. They had tried to steal my work. They had tried to steal my reputation. They had even tried to convince me that my future belonged to them. But they had failed, not because I destroyed them, not because I became stronger than them. They failed because I eventually stopped giving them the power to decide where my life would go. Tomorrow, I would return to the laboratory. There would be another failed experiment, another problem, another unfinished design, and perhaps another person who would disappoint me. That was fine. I would keep creating anyway. I would keep learning. I would keep trusting carefully. I would keep walking forward. And if someone ever tried to take credit for what I build again, I wouldn't need to shout. I would simply place the truth on the table. Then step aside. Let the evidence speak. Let the consequences arrive. And continue building. Because my life was no longer competition. It was mine. And this time, I intended to live every part of it.